starting wide receivers. Who do we like? Now, there's a guy on your list that I really loved last week, and that Thursday night game was such a disappointment, but you're going back to the well here.
Yeah, I am. I'm going to stick with Hollywood Brown. Yeah, that was just an awful game all around, both sides of the ball, right? Ravens and Dolphins, it was just gross. 9.7 fantasy points for Hollywood last week. Rashad Bateman's getting more involved in the offense. But I still like Brown this week against the Bears. They've allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and 3 have scored 23-plus fantasy points against them in their last 3 games. So keep the faith in Hollywood. I also like Brandin Cooks. Jen knows I love Brandin Cooks, much like she does, and I like the matchup this week against the Titans. Now, their defense has been good lately, right? They stopped Matthew Stafford, of course, 2 weeks ago, and this is a team that is playing at a high level. It's a home game, but Brandin Cooks has been a player who is getting targeted a ton. I would project a negative game script here for the Texans, which means they'll have to throw the football. And overall, the Titans defense has given up 14 touchdown catches to wide receivers, so Brandin Cooks should be in your lineup. I'm also starting Jalen Waddle against the Jets. I'm starting everyone against the Jets, basically. And Hunter Renfrow against the Bengals. Renfrow, as I mentioned last week, he is the new Wes Welker.
You also like DJ Moore versus the Washington football team. Again, the Washington football team surrendering the most points to opposing wide receivers, fantasy-wise, and quarterbacks. And that makes sense to me because people talk about Cam Newton, and you discussed picking up Cam Newton and saying, oh, but his shoulder, he's not going to throw. But I think that DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are going to get some short passes over the middle. I like that. And what do you think about Robbie Anderson? Would you play him as a flex spot now that if Cam's going to be starting? The matchup is so good.
Desperation flex start. I do have a little more faith in him, though, because it's not PJ Walker. It's not an inconsistent and unreliable Sam Darnold. I think Cam Newton clearly is better than both of those options. So maybe I wouldn't start him. I'd pick him up, though, and see what happens. He clearly has a rapport with Cam. If you saw after the press conference last week, both of those guys with the crazy dreads seem to be liking each other quite a bit.
I think it's the hair. I think it's the hair. I think they have a connection. Sir Per, look out. All right, and who are we sitting at the wide receiver position? A couple big names here, so give us some reasons why.
Right. Mike Williams, I was all in on him last week. I thought he'd have a good game against the Vikings, and you know what, Jen? He would have, except for he dropped a pass that would have been a touchdown. And so now you're looking at a guy who went from averaging 23 points per game in his first 5 games to 5.9 since then. I mean, that's terrible, right? And the Steelers' defense has not allowed a touchdown, and they've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to receivers lined out wide since week 7. So maybe I will reverse jinx Mike Williams and he'll wake up, but I can't trust him right now. And DeVonta Smith, here's a guy you got to play. I get it. He had a couple of touchdowns last week. He's had 2 good games in a row. Totally understand. He's got the Saints this week. More to the point, he's got Marshawn Lattimore this week. And did you see what A.J. Brown did last week against Marshawn Lattimore? Not much. So if you've got to start Smith, totally get it. He's been hot. You may want to temper your expectations. A couple of other guys to sit this week. Allen Robinson, who I still don't trust, and Kenny Galladay on Monday night against Tampa Bay.